Diddy's adopted daughter can't go to school, has no papers, no past. Where did she go? Sean Diddy Combs, widely seen as the reigning king of American hip-hop, now stands accused of grave offenses, sexual violence, coercion, human trafficking, and connections to the disappearance of a minor. The federal courtroom in Manhattan has become the epicenter of a case that's shaking the pillars of celebrity power. Courtroom 6B was packed. Reporters, attorneys, relatives, and a few well-known figures filled every seat. The name on everyone's mind, Ava Baron Combs, a girl who appeared without warning during Diddy's 2020 livestream and then vanished completely. Her sudden emergence during a carefully orchestrated livestream left questions unanswered, but the silence that followed as she disappeared from public view is what now haunts the courtroom. The first witness to take the stand was veteran actor Terrence "Dashin" Howard. This time he wasn't there to perform. He was there as a father, a witness, and a man ready to expose what he believed was a buried truth. Howard didn't waste words. He recalled the spring of 2020 when Diddy went live on Instagram amid the pandemic. Millions tuned in. A white girl sat stiffly between Diddy's sons. Her posture was rigid, her hands clenched in her lap. Her eyes darted between those around her. Her voice was flat, her words rehearsed. "My name is Ava. I'm a Scorpio. My last name is Combs. My other last name is Baron." Howard testified that wasn't a family moment. It was a staged scene. She didn't belong there, not as a daughter, not as part of that world. Shortly afterward, Howard came across a missing persons photo. Ava Grace Baldwin, last seen in Texas in 2015 at the age of 6. The resemblance was unsettling, the same eyes, same jawline, same unease on camera. He said it stopped him cold. It was like seeing the same child, aged by time and hidden in plain sight. He took action. Hired a private investigator. Cross-referenced school records, medical data, and timelines. There were no adoption documents, no educational trail, no trace of Ava Baron Combs before the livestream. She had come from nowhere. The girl that appeared next to one of the most powerful men in music had no legal footprint, no prior identity. Then came the images. 2 photos displayed side by side in court. One, Ava Baldwin's missing poster, the other Ava on Diddy's livestream. Gasps filled the courtroom, the same long forehead, the rounded chin, the faint but nervous half-smile. It was unmistakable. "This isn't coincidence," Howard said. "This is deliberate concealment." Diddy's legal team objected. The judge overruled. Howard pushed forward. This wasn't about family. It was about optics. That child was used and discarded when she was no longer needed. Reporters scribbled. A few observers wiped tears. What began as celebrity scandal had become a chilling allegation of exploitation. This wasn't just about abuse of power. It was about the machinery that shields it, the systemic silence that lets these stories fade. Howard described months of insomnia, tracking fragments of digital evidence, reading online forums, comparing body language, and finding a pattern too distinct to ignore. His tone sharpened as he listed Ava's last public appearance. The disappearance of her name from all content, the removal of any trace of her presence online. Every detail matched the classic hallmarks of forced erasure. His conclusion, Ava Baron Combs and Ava Grace Baldwin were the same person. The girl adopted publicly was the same child who had vanished from Texas 5 years earlier. He looked directly at Diddy. He knew. He always knew. Diddy didn't respond. His face remained expressionless, lips pressed thin. His attorneys shifted uneasily, but none objected. Outside headlines exploded. News anchors dropped segments mid-broadcast to cover the courtroom shock. Online hashtags erupted. Inside the courtroom held its breath. The judge leaned slightly forward, pen frozen over her notebook. Somewhere far from the cameras, one question loomed. Where is Ava now? Howard stepped down from the stand and walked past the gallery without a word. His testimony had landed like a hammer. the first blow in a trial that promised to expose more than celebrity sins. This was the beginning of a story about power silence and a girl who may have been erased. And it was only the beginning. More witnesses were waiting, more secrets were buried. But the silence for now had been broken. The courtroom was still reeling from Terrence Howard's explosive testimony when the next witness entered. Gene Deal Diddy's longtime former bodyguard stepped into view. His frame filled the aisle, his face worn by years of silent complicity, but today silence was no longer an option. As he took the stand, every pair of eyes in the courtroom followed him. Deal didn't speak like a performer. He spoke like a man who had carried too much for too long. His voice was low, deliberate. I saw things most people would never believe. I was there almost every day. I saw what happened to that girl. What happened to Ava was not about love. It was about control, about performance. Deal pointed directly at Diddy. She was brought in for the cameras. She was there when it suited him, then gone, when she wasn't useful anymore. That's not parenting, that's staging. The defense rose immediately. Objection. Speculation. Overruled, the judge said. Deal continued. When you've worked in this business long enough, you see the patterns. I've watched children become tools. I've watched them disappear. He paused. His voice broke momentarily, and I stayed quiet because I was warned. If I talked, I'd lose everything. But when I saw Ava's face, when I saw how she vanished, I knew I couldn't carry that anymore. His testimony rattled the room. Journalists scribbled furiously. The jury sat stunned. Diddy, still stoic, stared at the wall ahead. Deal spoke of the nights Ava was ushered into rooms, only to be removed just as quickly. Of conversations he overheard men laughing, women whispering, handlers deleting photos. He recounted how he was once ordered to escort Ava out of a hotel at 3 a.m., with no explanation, no guardian in sight. She was quiet, eyes vacant. She wasn't there to be part of a family. She was a symbol, a distraction, a performance piece in a life crafted for Instagram. The courtroom was silent. Why speak now, the prosecutor asked. Deal exhaled. Because children aren't props. Because that girl deserves justice. Because if I don't say it, who will? Then came the courtroom's sharpest turn yet. The prosecution asked Deal about internal surveillance systems, those in Diddy's properties. The rooms, the halls, even the guest quarters. Deal nodded slowly. Were they recording during Ava's time there? Yes, Deal replied. Everything was always recording. Are those tapes still accessible? His voice hardened. They were. But I don't know if they still exist. The implication was devastating. Evidence may have been destroyed. But the idea that those moments might have once been captured sent a jolt through the room. Deal closed with one final statement. If anything ever happens to me, know this, there's more to this story. There are others. And if you dig deep enough, you'll find them. As he stepped down, the courtroom was silent, not stunned, not skeptical, just silent. Outside media outlets released headlines in rapid succession. Inside, prosecutors prepared their next witness. The pressure was building, the questions growing sharper, but one fact was becoming clear. This wasn't just about a missing girl. This was about a network of silence, and the people finally brave enough to break it. And with Deal's testimony, the silence cracked again. The court recessed for lunch, but nobody left the courthouse, not really. Even outside the chamber, the story kept moving. One floor above law enforcement was coordinating with Homeland Security. A federal agent had been scheduled to testify next, and what he had to say, prosecutors promised, would pull this story out of the courtroom and into the digital underworld, where secrets aren't buried but archived. The storm wasn't coming, it was already here. By the time the courtroom reconvened, word had spread Homeland Security was on deck. And not just any official. The lead digital crimes agent tasked with tracking evidence across devices seized from Diddy's homes and offices. Agent Rios took the stand. His posture was crisp. His voice was clipped, methodical, and unrehearsed. There was no drama in his delivery, only data. But in this room, the facts were damning enough. We've analyzed over 47 terabytes of digital material, Rios began. Devices were seized from multiple residences. What we are reviewing includes personal messaging, encrypted file transfers, internal security footage, and metadata logs. He clarified that investigations were ongoing, but already several flagged files had surfaced, some linked to timestamps matching Ava's appearance in Diddy's livestream. Have you found any direct video evidence connected to the child known as Ava Baron Combs? The prosecutor asked. Rios hesitated, then nodded. Yes, we recovered encrypted video archives that include her presence in multiple settings within Mr. Combs' private residences. Murmurs rippled across the gallery. Do any of these suggest coercion or trafficking? We are not ready to make that legal determination. But the context of certain files, especially where adults are seen staging interactions while the child appears distressed, has raised serious red flags. The defense protested. This is prejudicial. No foundation has been laid. The judge held firm. Let the agent finish. Rios described a recurring pattern. Ava's footage often showed her isolated, sometimes silent, sometimes speaking lines that appeared coached. One particular file, he noted, contained a sequence nearly identical to her livestream debut, a script rehearsed repeatedly in front of a camera. And after her last appearance in the data set, the prosecutor asked. Nothing, Rios said. She disappears. No more mentions, no files. Her digital trail stops cold. The room froze. A complete digital vanishing act. Prosecutors presented a timeline comparison between Ava Grace Baldwin and Ava Baron Combs. Where one vanished, the other appeared. Their birthdays aligned. So did biometric data from unconfirmed sources. Enough to form a chilling possibility. Is there any record of legal adoption? Asked the judge. Rios replied, none that we could verify. No court filings. No custody paperwork. Her school enrollment data only begins months after the live stream. At the defense table, Diddy looked pale. His lawyers scribbled notes furiously. Then came the turning point. Rios confirmed that their team had found communications between staff at Diddy's property discussing how to minimize Ava's presence post-live stream. One message read, "Make sure no more photos get out. She was a one-time appearance." A gasp echoed across the courtroom. The prosecution turned to the judge. We believe this constitutes an intentional erasure, not just of digital traces, but of a human being. The judge, expression unreadable, asked Rios to submit the files into sealed evidence. From that moment, the courtroom's tone shifted. This wasn't hearsay. This wasn't celebrity gossip. This was now a federal investigation, one with surveillance logs, erased footage, and internal communication logs backing its claims. Journalists outside the courthouse were locked in live broadcasts. Networks broke programming to carry the hearing's latest revelations. Social media buzzed. Hashtags trended globally. Where is Ava? Just Diddy trial. Your race not lost. As Rios stepped down, the prosecution issued a stark reminder. A child disappeared from the public eye. Her name was paraded once, then buried in silence. That silence now has a timestamp, and it's our job to find out who buried it, and why. Court was adjourned. No one moved. For a moment, even time itself seemed to wait, because now everyone in that courtroom understood this wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a blueprint, one that detailed exactly how a child could be erased in the age of total surveillance. And the most terrifying part, no one noticed until now. As the trial stretched into its most volatile chapter, a name repeatedly emerged not from the witness list, but from every news ticker, podcast feed, and viral thread. 50 Cent. Curtis Jackson, music mogul turned provocateur, had become a digital storm unto himself. He wasn't in the courtroom. He didn't need to be. He was louder from outside. From the moment Terrence Howard testified, 50 Cent's social media presence intensified. He posted old clips, shared cryptic commentary, and teased what he called the documentary they don't want you to see. They can't prosecute on what we watched, but we can't unsee it either. He wrote, posting a side-by-side photo of Ava's livestream appearance and Ava Grace Baldwin's missing poster. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors knew his voice mattered. Outside, the public hung on every word. Diddy's attorneys tried to paint 50 Cent's involvement as a vendetta, decades of industry rivalry rebranded as activism. But intent was no longer the point. The information was, and the information was damning. Jackson claimed he had unreleased footage from inside the Combs estate. Private parties, security camera dumps, deleted livestream rehearsals. His message was clear: if the courtroom didn't deliver justice, the internet would. A media leak confirmed what prosecutors hadn't yet introduced. A whistleblower from Diddy's digital team had come forward anonymously. This person claimed to have seen metadata logs being deleted in real time. FTP transfers, file wipes, emergency hard drive swaps during the week Ava vanished. The implications were explosive. The court scrambled to issue a protective order. The defense dismissed it as fabrication, but the judge allowed the issue to be explored. Terrence Howard returned briefly to the stand. The prosecution asked whether he'd been in touch with Curtis Jackson. Howard's answer was careful. "We've exchanged messages. He showed me a clip before it went public. It confirmed things I'd been afraid to say out loud." The judge narrowed her eyes. "Was this clip submitted to the prosecution?" Howard nodded. "It's in evidence now." What the jury saw next wasn't a bombshell. It was a slow leak of truth, one frame at a time. A rehearsal video. Ava reading a line, "Papa Combs rescued me." She stumbles over the words. A man's voice off camera prompts her, "Again, but this time smile." The gallery fell into stunned silence. The video was time-stamped 2 weeks before her livestream debut. It wasn't candid, it was scripted. The next message was worse, a deleted text thread recovered from one of Diddy's assistants. It read, "She's too stiff on camera. Maybe move her behind the boys next time." Less direct. That line alone shifted the jury's posture. "Who gave those directions?" the prosecutor asked. Agent Rios recalled, briefly confirmed the message came from a verified device in Diddy's guest wing. The defense launched a fiery rebuttal. Even if true coaching a child doesn't equal criminal conduct. YouTube families do it every day. The prosecution leaned in. But YouTube families don't make the child disappear afterward. That line hit like a hammer. The courtroom, though tethered to procedure, was cracking beneath the weight of what it heard. This wasn't just about trafficking or abuse. It was about manipulation performed for the world, then scrubbed from existence. Curtis Jackson's name now hovered over the proceedings like a specter. He dropped another teaser. In a radio interview he said, "This isn't about beef anymore. It's about the kids no one wants to talk about." The judge imposed a partial media blackout. The leaks weren't stopping, but the court needed room to breathe. The whistleblower's written testimony was submitted under seal. Prosecutors didn't reveal the name, but confirmed the source had full access to the Combs digital archive before it was partially purged. Among the most haunting lines, they were instructed to remove her name from the device registry, as if she never existed. The defense called it hearsay, but nobody in the courtroom dismissed it. By the end of the day, the mood had shifted. The prosecution no longer had to prove intent. They just had to keep connecting the dots already outlined by digital ghosts and silent insiders. The court recessed. On social media, the pressure mounted. What started as a legal battle had become a public reckoning. And somewhere in the growing storm of attention was the question louder than any judge: where is Ava? And what will happen if the world forgets again? By the time the court reconvened, it was no longer a matter of tabloid spectacle. It was a high-stakes reckoning. Defense attorneys shuffled papers, but even they couldn't ignore the tide. The prosecution had built a slow, grinding case not only of disappearance, but of deliberate digital erasure, corporate complicity, and theatrical manipulation. Now they were going after motive. Terrence Howard had laid the emotional foundation. Agent Rios had drawn the digital blueprint. Curtis Jackson had ignited the public firestorm. What remained was the cold calculus. Why would a man of Diddy's power orchestrate such a spectacle, and what did he gain by making Ava disappear? The prosecution called a former insider, Lyle Mencken, once Diddy's business consultant. He had worked on brand strategy, social media optics, and crisis response. Clean-cut, guarded, but willing. Why did Mr. Combs introduce Ava to the public in 2020, the prosecutor asked. Mencken didn't hesitate. He was losing control of the narrative. Multiple lawsuits were surfacing. He needed a redirection, a public gesture that humanized him. Ava was the image reboot. And when the attention faded, she was no longer useful. Gasps swept the courtroom. Mencken admitted there were conversations about optics, including focus groups and PR advisories, on how Ava played to suburban audiences. She gave him something he didn't have: sympathy, especially with Middle America. The judge demanded clarity. Are you testifying that the child was used as a public relations tool? Mencken nodded. Yes. Internally, we referred to her as the reset button. That line silenced even the defense. But it didn't stop the prosecution. They pulled up expense records, flights, hotel stays, security details, all revolving around Ava's brief public stint. Then nothing. A total cutoff. Next, they called on a forensic auditor. The accountant showed sudden drops in digital spending after April 2020, just after Ava's disappearance. No school tuition, no health insurance premiums, no caregiver payments. She vanished not only from cameras, but from the books, the accountant said. It was a damning spreadsheet. A child reduced to zeros and blank lines. The defense finally responded. They called Diddy's legal chief of staff to the stand. She attempted to reframe Ava's absence. She was never formally adopted. She was a family friend. We didn't want to exploit her privacy. The prosecutor cut in. Then why the live stream? Why the script? Why the messages to erase her? No answer. The courtroom knew. This wasn't negligence. It was a script abandoned mid-act. The next witness, a private investigator hired by Terrence Howard after Ava vanished. She detailed her 6-month search, checking shelters, scanning surveillance feeds, comparing photos from adoption databases. In one slide, she presented overlapping facial recognition markers: Ava Baldwin and Ava Combs. 91% match. Ears, hairline, jaw structure. The courtroom held its breath. This is not coincidence, she said. Then she showed a shelter intake form from Baton Rouge, dated 6 months after Ava's livestream. The name was fake, but the handwriting, age, and visual match were near perfect. It's circumstantial, the defense objected, but it's consistent, the judge ruled. The judge's tone had changed. The courtroom had changed. This wasn't the start of a trial anymore. It was the collapse of a defense. Outside media trucks doubled. Hashtags morphed from questions into rallying cries. Ava was here trended worldwide. Protesters gathered. Some carried signs. Others wore Ava's face. Diddy had not taken the stand, but it was clear the room was waiting. When the prosecution rested, the silence was louder than any closing argument. The judge stared long at the defense table. Diddy looked down, unmoving. The court recessed. But the verdict was forming, not in law books, in the public mind. And it was unforgiving. The message was clear: this wasn't just a trial about celebrity downfall. It was about the consequences of turning a child into a performance, and erasing her like one too. The next session was expected to be explosive. Diddy's defense hinted at calling surprise witnesses, but the question lingered in every corner. Could any witness undo what the world had already seen? And if not, how would justice find its way back to Ava? The courtroom returned to session under a shroud of tension. For weeks, the case had escalated beyond the walls of the federal building. Outside, protesters chanted Ava's name. Inside, the air felt brittle. Every voice, every step seemed louder than it should have. Everyone knew the final chapter had arrived. The defense, battered and cornered, made a last attempt to pivot. Their strategy to blur the facts. They called a digital security analyst who insisted metadata could be forged. They questioned Ava Baldwin's missing poster. They painted Terrence Howard as emotional, Curtis Jackson as vengeful, and prosecutors as speculative. They tried to call attention to the absence of a smoking gun, no body, no confirmed timeline, no single act captured on camera. But their witnesses didn't land. The jury had seen too much. Closing arguments began with the prosecution. Direct, unflinching. This case isn't about a feud. It's about a child erased by the machinery of fame, about a man who built a brand by breaking silence, then used that silence to bury a truth. They walked the jury back through everything: the live stream, where Ava awkwardly introduced herself, the rehearsed answers, the abrupt disappearance from public life, the discrepancies in adoption records, the screenshots, the metadata, the time-stamped videos, the statements from bodyguards, from witnesses, from whistleblowers. Each piece of evidence, they argued, was not isolated but interconnected. Together they told a single story of coercion, concealment, and control. Children don't vanish into thin air, the prosecutor said. Someone hides them. Then came the defense. It was quieter, measured, a tone that asked for doubt. Yes, things were irregular. Yes, optics were managed. But where is the concrete crime? Where is the definitive link between Mr. Combs and an abduction? They pointed to legal ambiguity, the absence of a body, the presence of conflicting accounts. They leaned heavily on character witnesses, former colleagues and industry allies, who described Diddy as complex but not criminal. They warned the jury about the danger of public pressure, turning suspicion into certainty. But the room wasn't swayed. Logic had been established, pattern proven, intent exposed. The judge issued final instructions. The jury deliberated for 3 days, not because they were unsure, but because the case was monumental. Every charge carried enormous weight. Every conclusion could set precedent. They reviewed footage. They read affidavits. They replayed the moment Terrence Howard compared Ava's live debut to a stage audition, and the moment Gene Deal said she was used and then made to disappear. On the 4th morning, the verdict arrived. Guilty, not just of conspiracy, of child endangerment, of human trafficking, of obstruction of justice, of using corporate infrastructure to erase a human life. Ava Baron Combs was legally recognized as Ava Grace Baldwin. Her name was re-entered into the federal missing child database. Her case was reopened. An active federal search resumed. A dedicated task force combining FBI, Homeland Security, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children launched immediate follow-up investigations. Diddy's sentencing hearing was scheduled. He was remanded without bail. Bailiffs flanked him. His attorneys looked defeated. The courtroom erupted not in cheers but in tears. Victims' advocates hugged in the back row. Reporters stood in stunned silence. Several jurors wiped their eyes. The judge looked solemn, not triumphant. Across the country, communities erupted, not in celebration but in release. Justice had found a way through. Curtis Jackson released his full documentary that same evening, titled "Did He Do It?" It included behind-the-scenes footage, interviews with whistleblowers, even a clip of Ava reading aloud from a children's book, her voice hesitant but clear. It was recorded days before she vanished. Terrence Howard returned to the stand for a sentencing impact statement. His message was short but thunderous. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. You don't need a badge to do the right thing, you just need a conscience. He spoke of being a father, of the sleepless nights, of how power protects power, of what it feels like to see a child disappear before your eyes and be told it's not your problem. In the final scene of the courtroom saga, the judge made one last comment before striking the gavel. This court recognizes that the powerful are not beyond accountability. Let this trial be a signal. The world saw Ava, and now the world will not look away again. Outside, the media frenzy reached a crescendo. Helicopters swirled above. Social media trended with Daesh justice for Ava, Diddy verdict, and never again. Talk shows, op-eds, and government officials responded within hours. State legislators in 3 jurisdictions began drafting bills to increase oversight on celebrity adoptions and minors in entertainment households. One line echoed through them all. Wherever she is, Ava matters, and justice has a long memory. As the courtroom emptied and the world processed the verdict, a deeper reckoning began to stir. What happened to Ava Baldwin and how long it went unnoticed is not just a tragedy, it's a cultural indictment. Sean "Diddy" Combs was not a fringe figure. He was the face of American hip-hop, an empire builder, a philanthropist, a mogul wrapped in charisma. For decades his power shielded him. That power was not accidental, it was systemic. The entertainment industry has long trafficked in myths. Stardom sanitizes sin. Success rewrites narratives. And when children enter the picture, we comfort ourselves with headlines about rescue and redemption. But the Ava case shattered that illusion. A child was introduced to millions on live stream, her story curated for maximum sympathy. Then she vanished, and almost no one asked why. That's the real indictment. The silence was not just in Diddy's mansion, it echoed through media houses, boardrooms, social feeds. People saw something was wrong. They chose to look away. Or worse, they rationalized it as eccentricity branding spectacle. That impulse to excuse the powerful is what allowed this abuse to metastasize. This trial made clear fame is not proof of integrity. Philanthropy is not innocence. Image is not character. As Curtis "50 Cent" Jackson launched his documentary, he made a cutting observation. It took a grudge to bring the truth to light. That should haunt us. And it should. It shouldn't require vendettas to force accountability, nor should it take a courtroom of exhausted jurors and a grieving public to validate what anyone watching Diddy's live stream should have seen, that Ava wasn't safe. Terrence Howard's testimony offered more than drama, it offered a model of conscience, of civilian courage. He didn't have to speak, he risked everything. He knew what power could do. He saw how Ava flinched, and he refused to stay silent. What does it say about our institutions that justice required an actor and a rapper to do what journalists, executives, and agencies wouldn't? Yes, Diddy's conviction brings closure, but justice is not retroactive. It does not restore lost years. It does not undo trauma. It does not erase the nights Ava may have spent wondering if anyone even remembered her name. We must ask harder questions. Why aren't there federal protections for children adopted by celebrities? Why can adults parade children on live streams with no legal recourse? Why was a missing child's reappearance never verified by agencies responsible for her safety? These are policy failures, but they're also cultural ones. For too long, we've celebrated proximity to power more than truth. Diddy's downfall wasn't sudden. It was slow, enabled, encouraged. Behind every enabler is a society that values loyalty over justice. Ava Grace Baldwin, wherever she is, became the unwilling center of that hypocrisy. The world must not forget her. Legislative efforts are already emerging. Ava's law, proposed in 3 states, seeks to require background checks, mental health assessments, and third-party oversight for non-relative adoptions involving public figures. A federal version is under review. These measures are a start, but laws mean little if culture doesn't change. The next time a child is pushed into a spotlight, we must ask, who benefits, who protects them? Who owns their story? Diddy may spend decades behind bars, but if we learn nothing from Ava's erasure, the real sentence is ours. This trial was not the end of an era, it was the mirror. It showed us what we tolerate, it showed us what we ignore, it showed us what we excuse, And now we must decide what kind of society we are willing to be.